Take it down by Friday, or I'll have it removed and billed to your account. Marlene Voss shouted at me from my side of the property line, blazer crisp, tennis shoes white, clipboard tucked under one arm like a badge. I stood in my work boots with one hand on a post level, sweat dampening the back of my t-shirt, and stared at the violation notice she'd printed in bold red letters. Illegal encroachment into HOA common use corridor. For a second, the whole scene felt absurd enough to be funny. Me with cedar dust on my jeans, Marlene in a board president uniform, both of us facing off over 6 feet of fence like we were negotiating a ceasefire. But Marlene didn't do jokes. She did decrees. She had perfected that polished voice that sounded polite until you noticed it was only ever used to issue commands. I'm Lauren Sullivan, 42, widowed 3 years, and the kind of person who reads bylaws before signing closing papers. I bought in Briar Glen for predictability. Sidewalks that got fixed, lawns that stayed neat, neighbors who generally respected quiet hours and each other's space. After Nate died, calm became a necessity, not a preference. Grief had taught me chaos can arrive without warning. If I could control anything, I controlled paperwork. So before I bought Lot 47, I read every page of the CC&Rs, every amendment, every architectural guideline down to approved mailbox fonts and mulch color ranges. It sounds rigid to people who've never needed structure to survive a hard year. To me, it was relief. Here were rules. Here were boundaries. Here was a life with edges. The fence itself had been my spring project. 4-foot cedar along the rear and side boundary where my yard opened toward a narrow strip of scrub grass, and then the clubhouse parking lot beyond it. I had filed the county permit. I had submitted the HOA architectural form with a site sketch. I had received written approval with 2 signatures from the then committee members and an email saying, "Looks great, Lauren. Proceed." I printed that email, saved the PDF, and put both in a binder with tabs because that is who I am now. I even waited 2 extra weeks for utility marking so nobody could accuse me of rushing. The installer dug exactly where the lot map showed. I checked line strings myself before the first post was set. Nothing about that fence was accidental. Marlene looked from my face to the posts and back again, like she was waiting for me to blink first. "This board has discretion to enforce community access rights," she said, tapping her clipboard. "You were warned verbally." That was untrue. No one had warned me of anything except that deliveries should avoid school pickup traffic on Maple Bend. "I have approval," I said, keeping my voice level because losing your temper with someone like Marlene is like pouring gasoline on dry leaves. "And county permit documentation." She gave me the smile she reserved for people she believed were beneath her jurisdiction. "Procedures can be corrected retroactively," she said. "Fences can also be removed retroactively." Then she pivoted and marched back toward the clubhouse path, already dialing someone on her phone. By the time I heard her say, "We may need to expedite compliance," my stomach had gone cold. The certified letter arrived the next morning before 9. Thick envelope, green postal sticker, my name typed in all caps like I was being served notice by a government agency instead of my own HOA. Inside was a formal demand. Remove the fence within 7 calendar days, pay a $1,500 non-compliance assessment, and accept daily fines beginning immediately thereafter. The page cited Article 7 discretionary enforcement powers and that same common use corridor language. But no survey, no easement number, no map reference, just declarations. I sat at my kitchen table with my coffee going bitter and opened my binder. Permit copy, approval form, email authorization, photos from installation day. I scanned everything and sent a calm response attaching each file. Subject line: Request for immediate correction of erroneous violation. I even wrote, I believe this may be an administrative misunderstanding. Marlene replied in 19 minutes and copied what felt like half the neighborhood. She wrote that the committee's signatures were procedurally defective, that my construction materially interferes with long-standing pedestrian circulation, and that community standards require immediate corrective action. Then she added one sentence that made my ears ring. Homeowner Sullivan has elected confrontation over cooperation. It was a public shaming disguised as governance, and it worked faster than I expected. 2 neighbors texted asking if I was in legal trouble. Another asked if my fence was the reason pool hours might be restricted. At the mailbox kiosk, a woman I'd chatted with for years gave me a tight smile and said, "Hope this gets resolved quickly." The way people talk when they mean, "Please stop being the disturbance." Marlene hadn't just cited a rule. She had framed a narrative, and in HOA politics, narrative is currency. By Friday, the pressure turned physical. I came home from work and found orange paint marks along sections of my fence line, little slashes on the ground, and one bright swipe on a post cap. A landscaping contractor's business card was rubber-banded to my gate latch with a handwritten note on the back, scheduled for removal per HOA directive. No date, no signature, no legal authority, just an instruction as if my yard were already theirs to manage. I stood there with my keys still in hand, looking at that card while evening sprinklers clicked on across the street. That was the moment it stopped feeling like bureaucratic incompetence and started feeling like trespass in progress. I took photos from every angle, zoomed in on tire tracks near the curb, and bagged the card in a zip-top kitchen bag like evidence. Then I called the contractor directly. He sounded uncomfortable and said, "Ma'am, we were told this is common area restoration." I said, "It is not common area. It is my deeded lot. Do not step onto it." He promised to check with management. I believed him only enough to install a motion camera that night. People who've never dealt with an aggressive HOA think the stakes are mostly annoyance and angry emails. They are wrong. The machine has layers. Once you're marked non-compliant, fines can snowball into liens. Liens complicate refinancing, insurance changes, and eventually sale. In some states, associations can foreclose over comparatively small amounts if they follow procedure. I knew that because I had read the statutes before closing, and because Nate and I had once spent a weekend helping his sister fight a wrongful utility lien that nearly sank her home purchase. A house is not just siding and shingles. It's leverage against your whole future. Mine was paid down with years of careful budgeting after hospital bills and funeral costs. The idea that someone could weaponize administrative language to threaten that, because a path people happened to use was treated as entitlement, lit something in me that grief had left very little room for. Pure, focused anger. The social stakes mattered too, though I hated admitting it. Briar Glen looked neighborly on the surface, but under Marlene it operated on quiet incentives. Stay agreeable, stay included. Challenge authority, and suddenly your pool key glitches, your architectural requests stall, your name shows up in meeting minutes with passive-aggressive phrasing about disruptive conduct. The following Monday, my pool fob stopped working. At first, I thought it was dead battery nonsense, until I checked the resident app and saw my access status marked suspended, compliance hold. That wasn't about swimming. It was a signal. I emailed management, copied the board, and asked for a written legal basis to suspend amenities before adjudication. No one answered for 2 days. Then Marlene sent one line. Privileges are contingent on adherence to governing standards. Privileges. as if the assessments auto-drafted from my checking account each month were tribute, not contractual dues. I spent that week after work at my dining table with documents spread in concentric circles like I was reconstructing an accident scene. CC and RS amendments. Recorded subdivision plat from county records, easement exhibits, old board minutes pulled from the resident portal before they could be archived. The more I read, the clearer the pattern became. Marlene kept citing a pedestrian access strip that did not appear on the recorded plat at all. Not once. What did exist was a utility easement along a different boundary and a drainage maintenance easement near the retention pond, nowhere near my fence line. The so-called corridor appeared only on a glossy Clubhouse handout from years ago. An illustrated community circulation map with dotted walking paths and little tree icons. The kind of thing you hand out at summer socials. Useful for wayfinding, maybe. Not binding law, not property rights, not a legal instrument that let an HOA claim my yard by repetition. By then, I had stopped hoping for internal correction and started preparing for conflict with consequences. I consulted a real estate attorney, Daniel Kim, who listened without interrupting while I laid out the timeline. Then asked for 3 things: my deed, the recorded plat, and every communication from Marlene in original format. He sent a cease and desist demanding the HOA provide the legal authority for forced removal and warning that unauthorized entry would constitute trespass and conversion. Marlene responded by scheduling an emergency compliance hearing for the next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Agenda item titled Enforcement Action, Lot 47. I knew exactly how those hearings usually went. 20 minutes of board monologue, 3 minutes for the homeowner, then a vote already decided in private. Still, I went. Binder in hand, jaw set. If they wanted this formal, I would be formal. If they wanted a record, I would build one better than theirs. When my turn came, I requested one simple professional step to settle facts: an independent licensed boundary survey. Marlene actually laughed into her microphone before saying, "Go ahead, but lines won't change what this board has authority to enforce." Several people in the room chuckled with her, the way crowds do when power tells them where the joke is. I wrote her sentence down verbatim in my notebook and underlined it twice, because that was the real stake now. Whether ownership in this neighborhood meant anything beyond whatever one confident person could declare at a podium. I walked out into the warm dark with the hearing notice folded in my pocket, called Daniel from the parking lot and said, "Order the survey tomorrow. I want stakes in the ground." Daniel picked up on the second ring. "Already drafting," he said before I finished my first sentence, like he had expected this call from the tone of my last email. Traffic hummed around me in the clubhouse lot, cicadas buzzing in the crepe myrtles by the entrance sign. "I'll get a licensed surveyor out there. Earliest field crew is 48 hours unless we pay rush." "Pay rush," I said. "Done. In the meantime, no verbal fights, no touching any marks they put down, and no one enters your lot without permission. If a contractor shows up, you tell them they're trespassing, then call me." "I installed cameras." "Good. Send me tonight's hearing notice and your notes, especially that line about board authority overriding property lines." I looked down at the page in my hand, where I'd written it in block letters. "Already did." "Lauren," he said, voice flattening into courtroom calm, "they're counting on you to blink. Don't blink." I got home, pulled the gate shut, and stood in my darkening yard listening to the neighborhood settle into its evening soundtrack: garage doors, distant laughter, somebody's dog barking at nothing. The fence looked exactly as it had that morning: straight, level, unremarkable. It was amazing how fast ordinary objects became controversial when someone with a title needed a target. At 9:12 p.m., my phone buzzed with a new email from HOA Management Services. Notice of continued non-compliance. Daily fine assessed. $100 outstanding balance. $1,700. There was no attachment. No response to the legal questions I had asked. No mention of my permit or prior approval. Just accumulation. I forwarded it to Daniel, then opened a spreadsheet and added a column for date, time, action, supporting document, witness. If they were building pressure through volume, I could build a record the same way. By 11 p.m., I had a folder on my desktop called Lot 47 Dispute with subfolders for email, photos, notices, statutes, and audio. I wasn't proud of how much comfort that gave me. But organization was the only antidote I had for helplessness. At 6:41 the next morning, I heard tires on gravel and looked out to see a white pickup idling in front of my house. Not a survey truck. The same landscaping company logo from the business card was on the door. I stepped outside before the engine cut. A man in a neon safety shirt climbed down, clipboard in hand. "Morning, ma'am. We're here to remove unauthorized fencing and restore path access per HOA work order." I held up my phone so he could see the camera recording indicator. "You are on notice that this is private property. You do not have my consent to enter." He shifted his weight, glanced at the fence, glanced back at the street as if hoping someone else would handle this. "I was told it's common corridor." "It is Lot 47. Deeded, recorded. My attorney sent cease and desist yesterday." His shoulders dropped an inch. "Can I call the office?" "Please do, and I'm calling mine." I called Daniel while the landscaper stood by his truck speaking quietly into his radio. Within minutes, Daniel emailed a 2-paragraph reiteration of the trespass warning to both management and Marlene, with the landscaper supervisor copied. The truck reversed and left without anyone stepping through my gate. But not before Marlene herself drove slowly past. Window down, sunglasses on, phone held up like she was documenting my defiance for an internal newsletter. By lunch, she'd sent another blast to the neighborhood listserv. "Unauthorized legal threats by a homeowner should not be confused with actual compliance status," she wrote. "Board-directed maintenance in community circulation areas will proceed according to schedule." I stared at that sentence until my temples throbbed. Then I copied it into my spreadsheet, attached a PDF, and labeled it Potential Defamation/Interference. The survey coordinator called at 2:15 p.m. "Ms. Sullivan, we can put field crew on site tomorrow at 8. We'll need clear access along your boundary, and they may have to take control points near the clubhouse edge. Will you notify HOA? We normally notify adjacent property stakeholders as a courtesy. Would you prefer your attorney handle communication?" "Attorney," I texted Daniel. He replied with one word, "Handled." At 7:03 p.m., an email arrived from Marlene with the subject line, "UN-approved vendor activity." She claimed any contractor engaged by a homeowner to alter, inspect, or assess shared boundary conditions required prior board consent and threatened to deny site access to unapproved personnel for safety reasons. I called Daniel again. He sounded amused in the dry, dangerous way attorneys do when opposing counsel gives them something useful. "She has no authority to block a licensed survey on your parcel. If she interferes, we document. Don't argue law with her at the curb. Let the survey chief call me if needed." Can she physically stop them? She can stand around and perform outrage. She cannot legally stop measurement on your deeded land. At 8 p.m., my gate camera sent a motion alert. Marlene and two board members, Todd from finance and Elise from landscaping, were standing near the back edge of my lot, just outside the fence, looking through slats and pointing toward the clubhouse path. I watched from my kitchen window without turning lights on. Todd kept checking his phone. Elise shook her head repeatedly. Marlene's posture was rigid, one hand braced on her hip, the other slicing the air in short directives. They left after 4 minutes. I slept badly and woke before dawn. The survey truck rolled in at 7:56 a.m., logo on the door, Ridgeway Geomatics, LLC. 2 technicians in broad brim hats, unloaded tripods, and a total station with the practiced rhythm of people who did this in heat, wind, and argument. The crew chief, a compact man named Javier, introduced himself at the curb and asked me to confirm property corners from my deed packet. I handed him copies already clipped together. "You expecting company?" he asked quietly, eyes flicking toward the clubhouse. "Probably." He nodded like he had seen this movie before. By 8:20 they had prism poles set along my side yard and were shooting lines toward iron pins I'd never noticed near the drainage swale. Orange flagging fluttered at knee height. The first challenge came at 8:34, right on schedule. Marlene strode over from the clubhouse in a navy sheath dress and white sneakers, carrying a binder thick enough to stop a door. Behind her trailed the community manager, a young guy named Brett, who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. "You cannot conduct unapproved measurements affecting HOA property," Marlene announced to Javier, not to me. "This is an active compliance matter." Javier didn't even look up from his tablet. "Ma'am, we are surveying per client authorization on a parcel 47 and tying into recorded subdivision control. We are not requesting your permission. You're standing adjacent to common infrastructure." He tapped his screen. "Then you'll want accurate data." I almost smiled. Marlene did not. She turned to me. "Lauren, if you continue this antagonistic process, the board will consider additional sanctions for harassment of volunteers." "Please put that in writing," I said. Brett tried a soft intervention. "Maybe we can all wait for legal review." "Exactly," Marlene snapped. "And legal review comes through the board." At that, Javier finally looked at her, polite but immovable. "If this site is unsafe for us to complete contracted work, we'll note interference and bill mobilization. Otherwise, we proceed." For a beat, nobody moved. Then Marlene gave Brett a look that said not now and stepped back to the sidewalk, phone already at her ear. She stayed there nearly an hour, occasionally taking photos. I stayed out of the technician's way, answered only factual questions, and watched small fluorescent whiskers multiply across my yard. Red here, orange there, each one a tiny refusal to be bullied by rhetoric. Around 10:10, Javier asked permission to access a narrow strip near my rear corner where scrub grass met the clubhouse retaining wall. As he sighted through the instrument, he paused, rechecked, and called one of his techs over. They spoke in low voices. The tech took another shot. Javier frowned, then took a third. He walked back toward me. "Miss Sullivan, we're seeing something odd at the back line. I don't want to speculate until drafting is complete, but we'll need to set temporary stakes along that run this afternoon." "What kind of odd?" He chose his words carefully. "Potential overlap with built improvements." My pulse kicked once, hard. Overlap meaning could be measurement noise, could be historical build drift, could be encroachment. We confirm in office. Marlene, still hovering within earshot, called out, "There is no overlap. That path has existed for years." Javier gave her a neutral nod and went back to work. By the time the crew left, There were bright stakes at intervals behind my fence and 2 near the edge of the clubhouse lot, each capped with fluorescent ribbon that snapped in the breeze. They looked temporary, harmless. They also looked like warning lights. At 3:17 p.m., the daily fine notice arrived. Another $100. At 3:22 p.m., a separate email arrived from management. Your amenity privileges remain suspended pending final compliance determination. At 3:40 p.m., my next-door neighbor, Carla, knocked carrying a plate of oatmeal cookies and the expression of someone delivering condolences. I just wanted to check on you, she said. Marlene told people you hired investigators to intimidate volunteers. I let out a short laugh I couldn't help. Licensed surveyors, not investigators. Carla looked embarrassed. I figured. But the Facebook group is getting ugly. Someone posted your house photo with "Know Your Boundaries" as a caption. Classy. She winced. For what it's worth, half those people are only loud online. After she left, I sat at my kitchen counter and ate one cookie standing up, staring out at my perfectly legal, apparently incendiary cedar fence. The second day of field verification was quieter on the surface and nastier underneath. No public confrontation, just pressure through channels. At 9:05 a.m., I received notice of a special board review concerning pattern of adversarial conduct detrimental to community cohesion. At 9:11 a.m., my resident portal showed a new line item. Administrative hearing fee, $250. At 9:18 a.m., someone posted in the neighborhood group that legal costs from one homeowner's selfish fence war could force dues increases. I kept forwarding everything to Daniel. At 11:30, he called. They're trying to frame you as the cost center before facts land. Standard tactic. Ignore noise. Preserve evidence. I'm being billed for a hearing they created. Noted. Recoverable if we prevail. If. He paused just long enough for me to hear street sounds through his office window. I have not seen a case this overplayed in a while, Lauren. Let the survey do its job. The draft map came in 2 days later, attached to an email with the understated subject line, "Preliminary Exhibit for Review." I opened it at my dining table with both hands flat on the wood, like bracing for turbulence. My lot lines were clean, hard black. My fence was traced in dashed brown, fully inside the boundary with room to spare, no part crossing, no nibble over, nothing that could be twisted into ambiguity. I felt a hot rush of vindication so sharp it almost hurt. Then I looked at the rear boundary. A thick red hatch filled a long rectangular strip where HOA improvements crossed onto my parcel. Labels sat like blunt instruments. Clubhouse patio slab encroachment, 8.2 feet at nearest point. Retaining wall encroachment, variable 9.0 to 10.7 feet. Parking stalls, 6. Encroachment, up to 11.1 feet. I blinked and zoomed in. The dimensions didn't change. The common use corridor Marlene had invoked for weeks was not a recorded easement. It was, on paper, my land occupied by their amenities. I called Daniel without standing up. He answered on speaker with typing in the background. Tell me you got it. I got it. How bad? Patio, wall, 6 parking spaces, 8 to 11 feet over my line. Silence, then a low whistle. Okay, we are done playing defense. He switched instantly into strategy mode, voice clipped and precise. Save the email, metadata intact. Do not send this to anyone yet. I want final stamped survey before demand. Once final lands, we move on multiple tracks. Trespass, declaratory relief, quiet title posture, and potential ejectment leverage. Ejectment as in they move structures? Ejectment, as in a court, can order removal of encroachments from your property, yes. Often that pressure brings settlement fast. I leaned back, suddenly aware of how tightly I'd been holding my shoulders for weeks. They tried to tear down my fence for being inches wrong. They're 11 feet over. Facts are rude that way, he said. And facts recorded with the county outrank HOA theater. By evening, Ridgway's final signed survey arrived with seal and certification block. I printed it at full scale at a shipping store and carried the tube out to my car like it contained a live current. On my way home, I passed the Clubhouse. For the first time, I didn't see it as a neutral neighborhood amenity. I saw corners, lines, occupied strip, liability. Marlene was in the parking lot near the curb, talking to Todd. She saw me, smiled the confident smile she wore when she believed process itself guaranteed victory, and raised a hand in a little wave that somehow felt like a summons. I waved back, polite as ever, with a 3-foot survey tube resting across my passenger seat. The next morning, fluorescent stakes appeared at every surveyed point, brighter than caution tape, impossible to ignore. One sat near the edge of parking space 4, another beside the retaining wall, another at the patio corner where residents like to set folding chairs during summer potlucks. People slowed as they walked by, reading the tiny tags, then looking from the stake to the clubhouse and back again, doing geometry in real time. By noon, board members who had copied all those compliance emails stopped meeting my eyes in the mailbox lane. Brett from management sent a terse message asking if informal discussion might be preferable to further escalation. Todd texted, "Can we chat neighbor to neighbor?" I didn't answer either one directly. I sent both to Daniel. At 2 p.m., his draft demand letter hit my inbox, 10 pages plus exhibits. The opening line was surgical. Our client will no longer entertain unlawful enforcement proceedings predicated on a fictitious easement, while your association remains in continuing trespass upon her deeded parcel. I read it twice, then once more, and felt something settle in me that hadn't settled since Marlene first stepped onto my line with her clipboard and her decree. Not relief? Not yet. Position? Position. I approved Daniel's letter at 2:11 p.m. At 2:19, he sent it certified and by email to every director, management, and the HOA's general counsel. At 2:47, Marlene replied, all with 2 words in the body: received, noted, and attached notice of an emergency executive session to address homeowner litigation threats and community asset protection. By 3:05, the resident portal pinged. Special assessment, interim legal defense. $2,800 due in 10 days lot. 47 additional compliance security deposit. $5,000. I read it twice because it looked like parody. They were billing the neighborhood for their defense, then charging me extra for making them defend it. At 3:18, another notice posted to my account. Notice of intent to lion. Outstanding balance now included the original $1,500, daily fines, hearing fee, administrative investigation costs, and the new security deposit. Total, $10,950 and climbing. This was the escalation Marlene understood best. Make resistance unaffordable before it becomes contagious. Daniel called at 3:31, already angry. They cannot unilaterally invent a security deposit category and pin it to one owner for asserting title rights. I'm drafting objection and demand to suspend collections pending adjudication. Will that stop the lien? Not automatically. That one word hit harder than everything else. Lauren, listen, he said. If they record, it clouds title. It doesn't mean they own anything. It means we fight on another front. Another front costs money. I know. At 4:02, I got an email from Ridgeway Geomatics. Short, corporate. Careful. We have received correspondence from counsel for Briar Glen, HOA, alleging our field activities interfered with common operations and requesting preservation of all project data for anticipated litigation. Pending legal review, Ridgeway personnel will not engage in direct resident communications regarding findings. Translation: Marlene had reached for my evidence chain. At 4:20, neighborhood Facebook lit up with a screenshot of the special assessment notice and comments like, "One person can bankrupt a community, and if she wanted acreage, she shouldn't have bought HOA." Someone posted a zoomed-in photo of my survey stake by parking space 4 and wrote, "This is harassment." I turned my phone face down and kept working my spreadsheet. By evening, the threat had moved from gossip to procedure. Management posted bright paper signs at the clubhouse entrance. Temporary parking restrictions due to Survey Dispute Board is pursuing legal remedies to protect common assets. Marlene's strategy was obvious and effective. Frame me as the reason everyone was inconvenienced, then step in as the protector. At 8:06 p.m., Daniel forwarded a filing notification from County e-Filing. Briar Glen HOA had sued me first, not for fines, not for fence aesthetics, for declaratory easement by prescription, nuisance, and tortious interference with association operations. They asked for emergency injunctive relief to restore historical pedestrian and parking access pending final determination. They wanted a judge to bless their use now and sort title later. "What are they trying to get immediately?" I asked when he called. "Status quo order in their language," he said, "which means your land used like theirs until trial. Could be months. If they get that, what do I lose?" He didn't sugarcoat it. Leverage, time, possibly the practical ability to force removal. And if they secure fees on any part of this, financial pressure spikes. I looked through my kitchen window toward the dark line of fence. So, if they can drag it out long enough, they win by exhaustion. That's exactly the model. The hearing on their emergency motion was set for the next afternoon with almost no lead time. I took a half day from work and sat in Daniel's office conference room while his associate printed exhibits in bursts from a machine that kept jamming on tabloid-sized paper. The plan had been straightforward. Survey, demand, pressure. Marlene had flipped the board and made us respond under her timeline. At 12:14 p.m., a process server found me in the hallway outside courtroom 3B and handed me a second packet. Amended complaint adding defamation based on my public accusations of encroachment and a demand for damages to association reputation. I hadn't made public accusations. I had sent one demand through counsel. But now the accusation itself was in a pleading, and pleadings have gravity even when they're nonsense. Inside, HOA counsel painted me as destabilizing, combative, fixated. He used words like campaign, disruption, targeting volunteers. He repeatedly called the disputed strip legacy access and said residents would face safety risks if parking and pedestrian flow were interrupted by unilateral acts. Daniel got up and did what he does. Quiet voice, exact citations, survey seal on an easel, recorded plat highlighted. He said, "Fictitious easement," without raising his volume once. The judge frowned through both presentations, asked 6 questions, and then did the thing that makes litigation feel like weather. Split the difference in a way that satisfied no one. Temporary order, 14 days. Maintain current conditions, no structural changes by either side, no removal of fence, no alteration of clubhouse improvements, no interference with ordinary use of contested area pending evidentiary hearing. I heard the key phrase and felt my stomach drop. ordinary use of contested area. So their patio and parking remained operational on my land, for now, under court order language broad enough for Marlene to weaponize as victory. Outside the courtroom, she didn't even try to hide the smile. "See?" she said as she passed me. "Authority." Daniel stepped between us without touching either of us. "Don't speak to my client." Marlene shrugged and kept walking. By 4:30 p.m., the board sent a community-wide email. Court confirms HOA operational rights, pending final review. Homeowner claims remain unproven. Not false enough for immediate sanction, misleading enough to do damage. At 5:02, the county recording alert hit my inbox. Notice of Leanne recorded. Briar Glen HOA versus Lot 47. They recorded anyway. I sat in my car in the courthouse garage with my hands on the steering wheel and did the math nobody sees. Retainer replenishment, potential expert fees, time off work, monthly bills, emergency fund drain. Nate and I had built that emergency fund in $20 increments when we were still paying his chemo co-pays. The account had always meant security. Now it looked like kindling. Daniel called at 5:11. "I just saw the lien recording. I'm filing motion to expunge and sanctions." "How much more?" Pause. "For full litigation through evidentiary hearing and potential appeal posture, another 15 in trust this week." I closed my eyes. I can do it. I hate that I can do it. I know. That night, I wired the money and moved the rest of my emergency savings into checking to avoid overdraft chain reactions. I also canceled the roof replacement deposit I'd scheduled for fall and took a penalty withdrawing from a small investment account Nate had nicknamed our Boring Future Fund. That was the genuine cost. Not theoretical stress, not internet rumor. Cash out, time out, safety margin gone. At 11:38 p.m., I opened my binder, stared at the tabs, and for the first time since this started, I wondered if Marlene had correctly calculated me. Not legally, financially, psychologically. How long I could keep choosing principle over peace before one of those choices broke something I couldn't rebuild. I didn't sleep much. Daniel. He stayed in the office after everyone left, tie loosened, jacket on the chair, city lights making a grid across the conference room glass. Lauren's file sat open beside the hearing transcript. Ridge of fluorescent sticky notes marking every overreach. He should have gone home. He told himself that twice and kept reading. The part that kept replaying wasn't the judge's temporary order. It was Lauren in the courthouse garage saying, "I hate that I can do it." Not dramatic, not performative, just exhausted math. He had seen this pattern before. Associations flooding a homeowner with process until the right answer became unaffordable. Years ago, his mother had signed one bad payment plan with her condo board after his father's stroke. And by the time Daniel graduated law school, they had sold under pressure to clear compounded fees she never should have owed. She never called it losing the home. She called it simplifying. He had called it failure for a decade. He also knew the other truth he had been professionally avoiding. Lauren was no longer just a clean file and a righteous claim. He admired her in ways that made him careful and, if he was honest, afraid. Afraid of making one tactical mistake and watching another widow get outspent by people who mistook procedure for virtue. At 9:02 p.m., he started an email to her, deleted it, then called instead. "Did I wake you?" "No," she said. "I was alphabetizing exhibits because that's apparently my coping mechanism." He almost laughed, then didn't. "Can we meet somewhere not my office? 10 minutes. I need to tell you something about strategy and me." There was a beat. Diner on Maple in 20. He got there first and took the booth by the window. When she slid in opposite him, hair pulled back, face tired, he saw she had brought a legal pad anyway. "No legal pad," he said gently. She set it aside. "I need to disclose a conflict risk," he said. "Not legal conflict, personal. I am not detached in this case." Her eyes narrowed, not hostile, just focused. "Because I'm your client? Or because of what this reminds you of?" "Both." He told her about his parents' condo, the fines after his father's medical decline, the recorded lien his mother never understood until refinance collapsed. He told her he had built a career around never letting that happen to someone else, and sometimes overcorrected into control. He told her today rattled him more than he showed. "I can refer you to another litigator if you'd prefer distance," he said. "I won't take offense." She looked out the window for a long moment, then back at him. "Thank you for saying it out loud." He nodded, waiting. "I don't want distance," she said. "I want honesty. If you're rattled, tell me. If I'm spiraling, I'll tell you. We don't do theater." Something in his shoulders released. She added softer, "And for the record, I'm not detached either." They sat in quiet while a server refilled coffee they hadn't asked for. No dramatic declarations. No movie timing. Just two people admitting the case had gotten under their skin for reasons older than this week. When they stood to leave, he said, "Tomorrow will be worse before it's better." She gave a tired half smile. "Then we'll document worse." Tomorrow started at 5:27 a.m., with my phone vibrating hard enough to rattle on the nightstand. Motion alert, driveway camera. I opened the feed and saw 2 flatbed trucks, 3 crew members in safety vests, and a sheriff's deputy standing near my gate with a folded paper in his hand. Behind them, in a Navy rain shell despite clear skies, stood Marlene. I was in jeans and shoes in under 2 minutes. By the time I pulled up to my own curb, one crewman was unloading a gas-powered saw and another was testing my gate latch. "Stop," I said, getting out before the engine was fully off. "Do not touch that gate." The deputy stepped toward me, polite but firm. "Ma'am, we're here to keep the peace while civil order is executed." He handed me the paper. Emergency board directive attached to the court's temporary order, claiming maintenance access restoration within contested area, and authorizing contractors to remove obstructive improvements impeding ordinary use. They had turned maintain current conditions into remove Lawrence fence by calling it obstruction. "This is not what the order says," I said. "That's for counsel," he replied. "I'm not interpreting civil documents." I called Daniel with shaking hands. "Voicemail," I called again. He picked up on the third try, voice tight. "I'm on with opposing counsel now. Put me on speaker with deputy." I did. Daniel identified himself, objected clearly, demanded stand down, said any removal would be spoliation and contempt risk. The deputy listened, expression unreadable, then said, "Counsel, absent superseding instruction from the court, we are here for breach prevention only." Meaning, he wouldn't stop them. Marlene walked up just close enough to be heard on my phone. "We are restoring common access under court-protected operations." Daniel's tone went cold. "Marlene, if one board-authorized contractor cuts that fence before clarification hearing, every director gets named personally." She smiled at me, not him. "Then file it." One of the crewmen revved the saw once, testing throttle. The sound sliced through the morning like a threat made mechanical. My camera pinged again as neighbors started gathering at the sidewalk in robes and gym clothes, whispering, filming, choosing sides with their bodies. Daniel came back on, fast now. Lauren, listen carefully. I'm filing emergency motion for clarification. The second clerk opens. Do not physically block equipment. Keep recording. Ask deputy for incident number. I need 20 minutes. 20 minutes is a lot of fence. I know. Marlene checked her watch, then nodded to the contractor foreman. The foreman lifted his arm to signal the cut crew forward. And I stood at my own gate, court order in one hand, phone in the other, not knowing whether the next sound would be a judge calling back or my fence coming down. The foreman's arm was still in the air when I said, loud enough for the neighbors and the deputy and Marlene to hear, before anyone touches my fence, I need the deputy's incident number and the contractor's written authorization with parcel ID. The foreman hesitated. Tiny pause, but real. Marlene snapped, proceed. I held up the court order. Read line 3, paragraph 2. Maintain current conditions. This fence is current condition. It has been here for months. The deputy kept his neutral expression, but he did pull out a notepad. Incident number is 26-11874, he said. I repeated it into my camera. Incident 26-11874. Time, 5:35 a.m. Board directed contractors attempting removal of private fence under disputed interpretation of temporary order. Marlene's jaw tightened. You are staging this. I am documenting this. The foreman lowered his arm. Ma'am, he said to Marlene, can I see the work order again? She handed him a clipped packet with theatrical impatience. He scanned it, frowned, and looked at me. This says, obstructive improvements in contested area. Your fence isn't in the rear contested strip, is it? No, I said. Certified survey in county format shows it entirely inside my side boundary. Marlene cut in. The fence blocks historical circulation. I turned my phone so the foreman could see the highlighted order and then the survey image. If you cut this, you're not restoring status quo. You're altering it, without owner consent. He rubbed his neck. Do you have a letter from your attorney? I pulled a folded copy from my back pocket, because of course I did, and handed it over. Cease and desist with trespass and conversion notice. Your company is named in prior warning. Marlene stepped between us. This is intimidation of a vendor under board instruction. Deputy? The deputy shifted his weight. I'm here to prevent breach of peace. Civil interpretation belongs to court. Exactly, I said. And the court has not authorized fence removal. My phone buzzed in my hand. Daniel. I put him on speaker. His voice came quick, clipped. Lauren, I filed emergency clarification at 5:29. Clerk accepted. Judge's staff has a copy. Put deputy on. I held out the phone. The deputy listened, gave his name and incident number, and nodded once. Understood, counselor. He handed the phone back. No new directive to me yet. Marlene smiled like she'd won anyway. Then we proceed. I looked at the foreman. What's your name? He blinked. Trent. Trent, I'm saying on record, I do not consent. If you cut, I will include you personally in spoliation and property damage claims. I'll subpoena your insurance file and your body cam equivalent footage if you have it. His crew behind him had gone very still. Marlene hissed, do not let her bully you. I ignored her. Trent, does your policy cover intentional demolition on disputed title where owner is present and objecting? He looked at me, then at the deputy, then at Marlene. I need my office. Marlene's voice rose. You are under contract. Yeah, he said. For lawful work. That was the first crack. I stepped toward my gate. planted both feet, and addressed the small crowd gathering with phones out. Everyone filming? Good. Please film the order language and the existing fence condition. Carla, in leggings and a hoodie, lifted her phone higher. Got it. Todd appeared at the end of the sidewalk, pale and unshaven, hair still sleep-flattened. What is happening? Marlene swung on him. Enforcement. Todd looked from saw to fence to deputy. At dawn? Before she could answer, the deputy's radio crackled. He stepped aside, listened, and came back with a different posture, still careful, but firmer. I have direction from Supervising Sergeant pending court clarification, he said. No physical alteration by any party until updated instruction. Marlene's face went hard. On whose request? Sheriff command after contact from court staff, he said. Stand down. She took a full breath through her nose. This is outrageous. I almost laughed from pure adrenaline. Instead, I said, no, this is pause. The foreman nodded to his crew. Pack tools. Marlene stepped close enough that only I could hear her. You think this is victory? You just made this uglier. I met her eyes. You brought saws to my gate before sunrise. Her gaze flicked to my phone, still recording. She forced on the public smile again. Board will respond through counsel. Great, I said. So will I. By 6:02, the flatbeds were pulling away. Neighbors stayed in clusters, talking in low, excited voices. The deputy gave me a card with the incident number written twice and said, quietly, keep everything. When the street finally thinned, I leaned my forehead against the cedar slat nearest the latch and let my breathing catch up with me. Daniel called back at 6:11. You bought the exact window we needed. I almost didn't. But you did. Emergency clarification hearing is at 10. We go in prepared to show attempted unilateral alteration. I straightened up and looked at the bright survey stake near parking space 4, ribbon flicking in morning breeze like a signal flag. Then let's finish this, I said. The 10 o'clock hearing was standing room only, and somehow Marlene still looked camera ready, as if she'd come for a ribbon cutting instead of judicial correction. HOA counsel argued first, trying to recast the dawn operation as non-destructive access restoration. Daniel handed up stills from my camera feed. Saw blades, tool staging, crew at gate. Marlene's directive to proceed. The judge's eyebrows lifted. Counsel, she said to the HOA attorney, if that is non-destructive, I'd hate to see your version of demolition. Daniel then introduced the survey, the recorded plat, and the timeline. Approval, retaliation, fines, attempted removal, lien, emergency morning operation. When it was my turn to testify, I didn't perform outrage. I read from my log. 5:27 a.m., 2 flatbeds on site. 5:31, foreman unloads saw. 5:35, I state non-consent and request incident number. I handed up printed screenshots with timestamps. The judge issued clarification from the bench. No party could alter any structure on or adjacent to disputed boundaries. HOA, prohibited from enforcing fence removal pending final adjudication. Lien challenge set expedited. Sanctions motion reserved. Marlene asked to speak and got permission. Your Honor, this homeowner has waged a hostile campaign that is fracturing community trust. The judge cut her off. Ms. Voss, trust is not an easement. I felt that line in my bones. But Marlene didn't fold. She pivoted by noon. An all-resident email hit with subject line board protecting community assets through full trial and a call for unity against private land grabs. She announced a Saturday informational session at the Clubhouse. No mention of the judge's rebuke, just selective phrasing and certainty. So I brought certainty of my own. Saturday, 4 p.m. The clubhouse room was packed and humid. Marlene sat at the center dais with gavel and mic, Todd and Elise beside her, Brett at the side table pretending to manage the projector. When open comment began, I stood with a cardboard tube under one arm and Daniel at my shoulder. "State your name for the record," Marlene said. "Lauren Sullivan, Lot 47. 3 minutes." "Not today," I said, and nodded to Daniel. He set 2 enlarged survey boards on easels at the front. My lot line in black, encroachment hatch in red so bright it looked like a wound. Murmurs rippled through the room. Marlene banged the gavel. "Out of order." I spoke into the room anyway. "Before the board discusses my fence, please identify the recorded legal instrument granting the HOA right to occupy this red area of my parcel, patio, retaining wall, and 6 parking stalls." Marlene hit the gavel again. "Cut her mic." Brett looked at Todd instead of at Marlene. Todd didn't nod. Daniel handed envelopes down the board table. "Directors, you are now each served notice of potential personal fiduciary exposure for knowingly enforcing false violations while concealing unpermitted encroachment." Elise whispered, "Concealing?" Marlene snapped, "Do not open those during session." Todd opened his anyway. His face drained as he read. I kept going, voice steady. I requested legal basis in writing 6 times. I received none. I was fined daily, access suspended, lien recorded, and my fence targeted for removal under a fictitious corridor not on the recorded plat. A man in the back stood up. "Is that true about parking spaces on her lot?" I pointed to the board. "Survey seal and certification are here. Anyone can inspect after comment period." Another resident called, "Why weren't we told this in annual disclosures?" Marlene rose, no longer polished. "Because there is nothing to disclose until litigation resolves title." Todd turned to her, mic on. "Did you know there was no recorded corridor?" Silence then. I knew there was historical use. "That's not what I asked." Elise lifted her envelope and said, voice shaking, "This says we could be personally named? Is that real?" Daniel answered from the side. "If directors continue enforcement knowing there is no recorded easement and continue retaliatory actions, yes." The room changed temperature. You could feel it. Marlene pointed at me. "She is threatening volunteers to extort association property." I said, "I am demanding the same thing you demanded of me. Comply with recorded boundaries." Voices rose. Someone shouted, "Release the legal bills." Another, "Rescind the fines." Carla from the 3rd row yelled, "You told us she was lying." Marlene brought the gavel down so hard the head popped loose and rolled off the table. For one long, raw second, nobody moved. Then Todd took his mic. "I move to suspend enforcement actions against Lot 47 pending independent counsel review and to enter executive session without President Voss as chair for conflict concerns." Elise, still staring at her envelope, said, "Second." Marlene's mouth opened. Closed, opened again. "You can't do this." Todd looked at the bylaws binder in front of him and said, "Article 5, Section 4. We can." The vote was 2-1. Marlene stood frozen, then gathered her papers in jerky motions and walked out through the side door without looking at anyone. No one clapped. It wasn't triumph. It was impact. The settlement conference was 10 days later in a beige mediation room that smelled like dry erase marker and old coffee. HOA's insurer had counsel there. So did independent association counsel. New face, gray suit, no taste for theatrics. Marlene wasn't in the room. For 6 hours we traded drafts. They tried broad mutual release with no admission and each side bearing fees. I said no. They offered to pause fines. I said no. They offered an operational easement over my strip for $1. I laughed out loud for the first time all month. At 5:42 p.m., we got terms that looked like reality. All violations vacated, all fines and charges refunded. Lien released within 48 hours at HOA expense. My attorney fees paid in full. Fence formally approved with recorded acknowledgement of compliance. HOA purchase of the encroached strip at premium above appraised fair market, with HOA paying survey, recording, and transfer costs. Mandatory independent legal review before future enforcement actions for 2 years. Governance audit initiated by member petition already filed. The mediator slid the page to me. You can sign tonight. I read every line, then every defined term, then every date. Old habits, survival habits. Add this, I said. No retaliation clause tied to amenities, committee service, or communications rights. HOA counsel hesitated. That's broad. That's intentional. Daniel didn't interrupt. Just watched me with that steady courtroom focus that had nothing to do with court anymore. After 15 more minutes, they agreed. I signed at 6:31 p.m. When we walked out into the parking lot, my phone pinged from the resident app. Pool access status active. I held up the screen to Daniel. Look who regained her dangerous swimming privileges. He laughed, tired and genuine. Terrifying. 2 days later, I stood at the county recorder counter while a clerk stamped the lien release. The heavy thunk of the stamp felt like a door closing. The same afternoon, Brett from management met me at the clubhouse gate, awkward as ever. I need to hand-deliver this per settlement. He gave me a check packet and a one-page letter on HOA letterhead. Lot 47 fence is in full compliance with governing documents and approved plans. I read it once and tucked it in my binder. Thanks, Brett, he exhaled. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I know. That night, I sat on my back steps with my shoes off and listened to sprinklers clicking in sequence. For the first time in weeks, my body didn't feel like it was braced for impact. Crisis had an aftertaste, though. My hands still reached for my phone at every vibration. My shoulders still tightened at engine noise near the curb. I was learning that winning and unwinding were not the same event. 3 evenings after final signatures, Daniel texted, "Case closed with court. Want company for non-litigation pizza?" I answered, "Only if we ban the words easement, lien, and corridor." He arrived with 2 boxes and no tie, carrying himself like he wasn't sure what role he was allowed to occupy now that he wasn't my counsel of record in active combat. We ate at my kitchen island, paper plates, silence comfortable for a while. Finally, I said, "So what happens to us now that you're not billing in 6-minute increments?" He set his slice down. Honest answer? Please. I have wanted to ask you to dinner for weeks. Real dinner? Not deposition prep with coffee? I didn't because ethics, and because you were under siege, and because I wasn't sure if what I felt was proximity, adrenaline, rescue reflex. It isn't. I looked at him. What is it? You. He gave a small, self-conscious laugh. Your mind. The way you stay calm when calm is expensive. The way you kept choosing facts over fear. And also the way you alphabetized exhibits at midnight and still remembered to feed your neighbor's cat when she was out of town because you are apparently incapable of being half a person. My throat tightened in that inconvenient way it does when truth lands cleanly. I was married to a good man, I said quietly. I still love him. I still miss him in dumb moments, like when I can't open a jar and there's no one to tease me for trying with a dish towel. Daniel nodded once. I'm not competing with your marriage. I know, but part of me has been scared that wanting anything new means I'm erasing something old. He leaned his forearms on the island. Wanting a future is not erasing a past. I stared at my hands. During the worst of this, I kept thinking, if I let someone in right now, they'll only meet the version of me that fights, not the version that rests. Then let me meet both, he said. We sat with that. I asked, are you sure this isn't just shared trauma bonding over municipal code? He smiled. I hate that this is a fair question. It is. It isn't that, he said, serious again. I liked you before Dawn's saws and emergency motions. I liked you in my office when you corrected my citation to subsection C and pretended it was accidental. I liked you at the diner when you said, we don't do theater. I like you right now, in your kitchen, with pizza sauce on your thumb and 3 highlighters lined up by color on the counter. I glanced at the highlighters and laughed despite myself. I'm not asking for forever tonight, he said. I'm asking for honest. 1 date, then another if we both want it. Slow enough to be real. I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding since the courthouse garage. Okay, I said. 1 date. He held my gaze. Saturday? Saturday. Not at a diner. Agreed. He stood to leave and stopped by the back door, hand on the frame. There's one more honest thing. When you were at the gate that morning, and I couldn't get there fast enough, I've never felt that helpless in my life. I crossed to him. I wasn't helpless. I know. You were extraordinary. That's partly why this scares me. Me too, I admitted. He touched my cheek, slow enough for me to step back if I wanted. I didn't. The kiss was gentle, brief, and somehow steadier than anything dramatic could have been. When he pulled back, he rested his forehead against mine for a second. Saturday, he said again. Saturday, I echoed. After he left, I stood by the door smiling at nothing, then caught myself and went to lock up because old habits die hard. At the next monthly board meeting, Todd read from a prepared statement with hands that shook only a little. President Voss has resigned for personal reasons, effective immediately. The room stayed quiet for 2 beats, then buzzed. Carla leaned over and whispered, personal reasons named. Consequences. I kept my face neutral and my notes neat. Independent audit reps sat in the back with clipboards. New counsel presented a draft enforcement protocol requiring legal instrument citation before any violation tied to boundary, easement, or use rights. Residents asked sharp questions now, real ones. Show us the map. Where is that recorded? Who reviewed this? It was annoying and glorious. A week later, I met the landscaper crew I actually hired at my side gate at 7:30 a.m. We installed heavier black hardware and a soft close latch that clicked like certainty. Along the inside line, we planted a staggered row of wax myrtles that would grow into a privacy hedge in 2 seasons if watered right. Carla came by with iced coffees and gossip. Elise resigned from landscaping committee. Brett transferred accounts. Marlene's house is listed. Listed. I tamped soil around a root ball. I hope she finds somewhere with very clear boundaries. Carla snorted into her coffee. At noon, my pool fob beeped green at the gate, and a kid behind me said, "Cool fence, Miss Sullivan." I thanked him and stepped through. That evening, Daniel came over in jeans with a small shovel because apparently this is who we were becoming. We planted the last 2 shrubs together while the sky went peach over the clubhouse roofline. When we finished, I rinsed dirt from my hands at the hose bib and looked down the cedar run. Straight boards, new hinges, hedge starts spaced exactly 30 inches on center. In the opening of this story, Marlene stood on my side of the line and told me to take it down by Friday. Now I stood on that same line in my own boots, gate solid under my hand, survey pins recorded, documents filed, and someone I cared about passing me the hose without being asked. Quiet, documented, boring, exactly what I wanted. And this time, everyone knew the boundary was real.